I always thought that meant that you took Simonize or something, like shellacking your thighs. Oh. All right, again, for you people out there in TV land, or those of you who might be watching this on television, I'd like to say the rules of the game here, the contest of the Wheel of Kairoot, is we hope that you people, the eventual prize winners, will be you, the viewer at home. I don't know. But what we're doing, most people just getting this on cable, I thought, was getting the whole hour. Every time we do these tapings, we do an hour, and about the first half is normally taken up with what's known as, and Kairoot said, 80 to 100 pages worth of everything from little stories to one-liners and abstruse, if not eccentric proverbs, and etc. And here, where we are taping this, we have a screen, and it shows the number of the page being read. And the people here, if they'd like to have an additional comment, they write down the number, and then I come up here, and we got the list, and I go back, and I make a comment. Those of you who don't get the first half of the show, you figure out what the hell this means. But no, that is the way it goes. All right. And as I was going to say, you could call your cable station and say, hey, what's happening? All right, here we go. Is everybody up to speed? I'm going to read them back out. Every now and then you may see me look down and not read it back out. Don't let that be discouraging to anyone. Just some of them, there's nothing else to say. And Kairoot said, here we go, without internal contradictions, no explanation even begins to resemble a real explanation. In man's secondary world, an ordinary world, can I have a pen? An explanation would be, if it's going to be whatever this means, a real explanation, valid. Explanation has got to be something that makes direct sense. Am I correct? You are. All right. But there is another way in which you can look at a real explanation if it is not somewhere. If Kairoot wanted to waste words for you people who are more verbose, you call it self or internal, self-contradictory, which is all superfluous. But the explanation has got to be faulty from a kind of more complex view. It has got to be contradictory. It's got to be the sorts of things, the examples I was trying to get you to see last time of 3 and then 3.5 or 4 ways to look at the idea of men, sincere, honest, educated, up-to-date men, saying, look at our fragile planet, little photographs and what we're doing to it. And you go, well, that's true. And then you can take another view and say, that's not true. And you can take another view and say, in fact, it's beyond true or not true. It's beyond whether that's even a fact or not. It's how preposterous, how pretentious, how egocentric, how almost psychotic is it for humanity to believe. When I made the little examples of let these people go out and stand next to a tornado, a hurricane, an earthquake, it takes a certain kind of quite ordinary intelligence to think that man's going to destroy the planet. Regardless of the fact that, as always, you can pick out statistics or you can pick out something very close by. Make people stare at the ground, which is ordinary state of consciousness. If you tell somebody, hey, we're destroying the planet, and if you start to say, wait a minute, I don't believe it, and they say, look over here, look out there at the street, look at that garbage on the street, and you look and you think, well, damn if you ain't right. Or they say, look at the statistics from NASA. We're talking about not just 1 or 2 people. We're talking about hundreds of people with suits and ties on and college education, and they say that the ozone is it's taking a trip. We're all going to die. And it shows it right here that we have 20% less than we had 50 years ago. And if you stare at that, you say, well, you got to be true. But then from another view, it's not their problem, but it is just preposterous. It's just childish. It's insane. It's no worse than anything else. It's like people believing in free will and believing in God and all sorts of things. But to say, it's possible that we could destroy this fragile planet, such as that life couldn't go, and that's it. I got news for you. All of us, even people with good suits and ties and haircuts, politicians, everyone is just yesterday's news. That's the fragile planet we're dealing with. So, but beyond that, here's additional contradictions. What if I got somebody to go that far? What if I brought a stranger in and drugged their coffee and talked this kind of crazy talk, and they went, I never thought about it, but damn if you're not right. That's silly. What kind of egomaniacs are we? But then, see, I tried to push you further. it is in fact not some sign of a malady. It is not a sign of any psychosis. It is a sign of health. Literally, for men to have gone to the point intellectually to believe. I'm trying to believe. See, you're supposed to be. Well, you're supposed to be up to the third point. That is that we're now sort of laughing at these guys sitting there with their space shots of planet Earth and saying, "Look at our fragile world. It's put in our trust, in our custody, and we may destroy it." And so we've gone past pro or con. Now you're to the point that, let's say that you were some ordinary person, that they go, "You're right. That is absolute insanity. I don't care how many statistics or what immediate locales at which they can point, like, look at that landfill. That used to be the South Bronx, and now it's nothing but one landfill," which I don't know how they tell the difference, but they say, and that's all it is. Don't write me from... And so let's say that you're now to the third stage, and you can say, "You're right, that's insane. That's insane. It is a sign of some kind of mental illness for men to believe that." That's right, see where we were. Now it's trying to say no, because I'm showing this contradiction, see, because you could believe, all right, I'm getting better. I'm past the point of some binary look at this. I'm beyond pro and con. Now that you made all those jokes and got dramatic and what, people believe that I do see that there's something beyond pro and con. That I now see that that's ridiculous. But wait a minute, there are contradictions within that. Because it's not ridiculous. That is a sign of good health for men to believe that they could do that. You understand? But from any ordinary view, it is fraught with contradictions. Because I'm saying it's a sign of good health, but I'm also pointing out to you just the fact it's insane. I mean, you might as well wait, I don't know, what will we say, for a politician to become humble. For an insurance salesman to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, was I disturbing you?" Or to wait for James Brown to start clapping on 1 and 3. You might as well wait for all of that. To wait for people to realize that something can be insane. That is, that this is not true. And it is a sign of good health. That there is nothing wrong by men believing something that is absolutely insane from one view, from a more complex view, that there is no possible way, forget it. Just, I mean, if you don't have anything better to worry about, if one of the things you've been worried about is man destroying this planet, if I could be of some just immediate, it's just gratis. Maybe you've got, I don't know, TB. Maybe you have the shingles. Maybe your feet swell up. Maybe you're going to die. But if none of that bothers you, and you're down to the point now that you're worried about man destroying this planet, and that's what's really bugging you, Bucky, I can tell you this, forget it. Your feet's going to swell up and kill us all before man destroys this planet. All right. But assuming I'm telling you a straightforward fact, then what I want you to do is see the contradiction within that from an ordinary view. If I got an ordinary person to go, "Well, all right, I think you're correct, that is silly. We should do something about this. We should stop people from doing it." Or, "Why don't, let me take your ideas, or let's put them in a pamphlet and point out to people you're worrying about, a moot problem." No. There's nothing wrong. It is a sign of health. In times past, it was more in religion, of men believing, yes, we've sinned against God. That's a similar sign of good health. It's kind of getting worn and frayed around the edges. But it's the same sort of thing. That is not, I could point out, well, that's ridiculous. Even if you took their own premise, if your mind could operate in anything resembling what even the human dictionary calls thinking, then somewhere along the line, having nothing to do with being anti-religious, somewhere along the line, people will go, "You're right, the idea that there's some kind of external force, commonly referred to as God, made us, and then he made us, that one force produced another one, and what he produced turned on him. that no, there is nothing in my nervous system, just an ordinary person, being neither pro nor con here for a second in that temporary moment of lucidity. I got nothing to do with religion. It's just that the nervous system doesn't work that way. That's insane. It's not possible. There's something's wrong with the way we think. That was a sign of extreme good mental health for men to believe. Well, are we a bunch of rascals or what? I mean, the gods made us and, gave us sex, good soul music, decent cars sometimes. And then look what we did. Turned around and was insulting. Just shame on us. No. For men to believe that. See, because then if you come in and took this kind of third position, for me to point out, and for you to even feel it in yourself, that you're right. That's insane. It can't be either true or false. It's just nuts. It's just a delusion of some kind for men to believe that. No, it's not a delusion. It's a sign of good health for men to believe that. And now for men to believe, because now you don't have to be religious, to believe that if we don't watch it, if we don't pull ourselves up, if we don't straighten up, slap ourselves around, get on the right track, baby, we're going to destroy the planet. It's Garden of Eden again. It's the whole thing over and over. It is from one view, but this is even a view past the point that ordinary people would have. That's what I'm trying to get you to see. That none of that's true, that in a sense it is, what's the worst word than pretentious? Childishly pretentious. Egregiously pretentious. P.U. How can men believe that they're going to insult the gods that made them? How can men believe that this earth that produced them, our mother, that you're going to turn around, that men, I don't care, collectively, all at one time, every man on this planet decides, they get together and they hold a secret meeting. Whatever it is, 15 or 5 billion people, and they all get together at night one night and decide, all right, we've had it with Earth, let's turn on that mother and just teach her a lesson. No way. I mean, it's not even a contest. And it's ridiculous. And so you say, you're right, it is. But no, it's not ridiculous. That's a sign of good health for men to believe that. I'm just using that. That is the kind, you remember where this even started? If it's a real explanation of something, it has got to be contradictory. But of course, at an ordinary level, that is insane. Which, of course, we have now just contradicted the explanation of that. Sue me. No, please don't. Don't sue. If you sue me, I got a new attorney joke. And Kyrut said, speaking of the idea of a variety of views, which we've talked about before, a variety of views is more than two. It's more than three. In fact, it's more than 4. And in fact, it is more than whatever number you ever think it to be. Did we just get through talking about that or not? No. We did. And Kyrut said, a father noted to his son, quote, a man with a belief in a holy book will never want for something to say. That we, in the last few weeks, I've mentioned several times, in the past, holy books, and they still are serving that same kind of purpose. They're beginning to gradually diminish, but still that is the historic and continuing, probably the primary apparent source of external authority. That once you decide, well, God's already said this, supreme forces, or nowadays you could say science, or you could say, if you were into the softer sciences, some of you who may be verging on intellectual impotence, I don't want to get into it. So you might be interested in the soft sciences. Or maybe you're just kind of prefer Dairy Queen instead of Bastard and Robbins. But at any rate, it is still a basis that if somebody else has already thought about this, is there somewhere that I can refer to, or if somebody else can, I don't even have to do it. If some minister or a priest or somebody says, some of you people think this, or I have to go out and blank. Fill it in. Remember, this is a quiz show. So if some of you people think that you can just go out with impunity and blank, but it says right here, my friends, impunity is not the the final name of this game. And you think, well, several times I've done that, and it made my head hurt, or they arrested me. And I wondered if I should do it again, or I felt guilty, or I was afraid my wife would find out, or whatever the story is. And you think, well, that kind of settles it then. I didn't know whether it was right or wrong. I know I sort of slipped around and did it, but wait a minute. If the gods, if some supreme, if some authoritative source says no, it's no. So, the kid's asking. The father's telling him first, a man with a belief in the holy book would never want for something to say, because he will not. And it's not just a holy book. A person who is a plagiarist, someone with ordinary intelligence that has accepted that there are external sources of authority, whether I can put my hands on them, whether I can understand exactly what they're saying, people has already answered. Collectively, man has the wisdom to answer my questions, whether it be through religious institutions or through science. So, the information is there. A man who has a belief in that will never want something to say. That is, he will never say, well, I don't know. He might say, well, I'm not sure. I'll have to go look that up, or I'll have to go talk to a rabbi or a priest, or I'll have to go see a chemist. So that's what the father said, and then the young man asked him in return, is that part of the attraction of such efforts? Now, he left it with a question. I'm quoting it. A guy says, quote, a man with pent-up emotions is a man with emotions inside of him. We're getting close to the kinds of ones that I shouldn't say anything about, but there is an addendum for anyone. If I were to remind you people may be watching this, just because some of these might make you laugh, they're not intended simply as jokes, by the way. There is an addendum, Kyrut added. It says here that Kyrut, parenthetically, was wearing a contractor's costume. And Kyrut added, a closet with an inside also has another side. That's on the same page as the one about a man with pent-up emotions. So at least you think there is no connection. There's at least a physical connection that he typed them on the same page. Then there was this other guy, Kyrut said, who began to think of the revolution and your revolution as, quote, your mind always being on a holiday. I don't know what to say. That's a figure of speech. I could say something, but... Come on, you don't miss anything about that. And Kyrut said, Commander Obvious, that's one of Kyrut's got this series, some characters that he writes about. One of them's Commander Obvious. So you know all I know, I'm just telling you. It says, Commander Obvious dropped off this reminder for us. It says, quote, the less you actually need something, the more you must be told you do. Again, that is... The only reason I hesitate, I've talked about this before, and once you start, and I pick out the easy example so we can move on, they almost sound too easy. And I don't want ordinary people out there who might be hearing this to immediately jump on it and take it as being a critique and to let you jump on. But advertising, all forms of proselytizing, trying to talk somebody, but all advertising, notice, is done for secondary efforts. There is no advertising done at the primary level. There is no ads on television. They're painted on caves from the Bronze Age in print. There's no advertising anywhere saying, listen, folks, you have got to screw more. We have got to have more sex. There's no ads exhorting people, you must eat more. Humans do not eat enough. You must sleep more. Advertising. For you to be encouraged to do something, the more you're encouraged, the less it is necessary from the investigatory view of dividing up the world into the necessary, the primary world, and then the secondary, which nowadays the secondary is necessary, but the point is, you could, in a sense, actually live with no more than a continuing activity, of whatever nature, in the primary world, that you could stay alive. that music is not necessary, fine food, gourmet dining is not necessary, love is not necessary, a nice home is not necessary, an automobile is not necessary, etc., when in fact they are almost. It is simply, and it gets beyond advertising, it's just the easy one so we can move on, but religion's always done it. You do it to yourself. The nervous system is wired up in such a way. What is guilt? There's no such thing as primary guilt. Nobody's ever felt guilty about screwing or eating or sleeping. You may wait a second while some of you ordinary people go, well, there's a goddamn lie. I resent that. It is not. Or they say, well, you're mistaken now. Not hardly. Well, maybe I am. But not now. No. People feel guilty about what? Overeating, undereating, eating sideways. They feel guilty, not about sex, but about having sex with somebody that looked like that. Or having sex with somebody who gave me this strange rash. Or, I guess it was a woman having sex, and it made me swell up, and I hadn't been overeating. You do not feel guilty. You do not have to be encouraged to do the primary. We're talking about sane people. We're not talking about anybody outside the mainstream of ordinary life. You do not, it doesn't even require any conversation about the primary world. It's all the secondary. But internally, what I was going to say is, besides advertising, besides religion and everything else, that you must be continually encouraged. The way this read, Kyru kind of gave it, he put it, well, at any rate, in this way, the less you actually need something, the more you must be told you do. That is part of the purpose of advertising. That's why they have to be dramatic. That's why, does man believe? That kind of stuff. You got to be dramatic about it. Ministers and people, you have to do this. Why? Because here, it's not necessary. Anything that you actually need, no one has, if you're sane. No one has to encourage you. It's only parents that have been part of the collective wisdom of life that has to tell a child, listen, you must eat your broccoli to grow up, which is not true. You must eat to grow up, and if the child is at all genetically sane, and assuming that it was a child of yours, we'll assume that it was sane enough. You do not have to tell the child to eat. If you don't try and feed it, the child will try, will chew on your fingers and your toes and a table leg. But when it gets down to that which is not absolutely necessary, like you must eat from all four of the four yucky food groups, that's not true. Or that you must eat broccoli to live. That's not true, and we all know it. And we just look at our president. Well, no. Maybe that's not a good example. Not just him personally, I just think about anybody in politics. But back to you. If you can get past all of this, it would appear to be external and is as plain as a wart on your face. It's internally, life drives, once you got your own secondary system going, you do this to you. Why else would somebody go out, no offense, because you got to have the secondary world now, there's nothing wrong, but why else would somebody go out and work 2 jobs to buy another car? To buy a newer car, to buy a car, well, I want a red one. I'm tired of having a green one. The guy across the street has a red Corvette, I've got to have a Corvette. Nothing wrong, it's a hobby, but it is not necessary. So why else would you go do it? Why else would somebody suffer over their sex life? Why else would somebody suffer over their position in life, their social position? Why would they suffer over what other people think of their ideas? It's all tied in, of course. It's not your fault, and it's not psychological. It's got nothing to do with Freud and the subconscious. That's just the crude reflections of it. It has to do with the fact that even you, each individual, the less you need something, the more you have to say you need it. It's not just some minister saying, you must do this. Or it's not just advertising saying, if you do not use this brand new deodorant, and if you don't put it under both arms, heavy duty, you'll be nobody. Your sex life will go, nobody will talk to you. You can say, well, that's ridiculous. I don't believe it. I mean, just in case maybe I'll buy some. But, I don't believe it's that bad. Advertising is prone to a certain amount of exaggeration, known as puffery in legal circles, that they're allowed a certain amount of that, and you're supposed to be intelligent enough to know, or you're not going to your whole life won't be ruined if you don't buy that. In case any of you ever want to get excited and think, well, I'm going to go sue Bristol Myers because that's a lie. The law allows, they don't call it lying. They call it a certain amount of puffery, or they used to, and you're supposed to be smart enough to know if it says, or if it shows a guy standing alone, sucking his thumb, riding a bus, waiting at a bus stop, and it says, here was Joe on Tuesday, and here he is on Friday in his new Corvette, and he's got 3 chicks with long blonde hair and extremely ample physical attributes. And you go buy a Corvette and you drive around for a month and there's no women, you can't go see General Motors. The courts in this country and all civilized, they're going to say, you mean you actually believe that? In other words, you're supposed to. So don't blame it on them. It's not just them and it's not just you, but it is built into the system of the secondary world that you do have to do that to you. Why else would somebody go to church? So, just don't blame it on them. Why else would somebody get up on their one off day, or whatever day, I don't know what they are anymore, Tuesdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. I guess I got them all. But on your off day, why would you get up, put on a suit, wash them, put on that deodorant, and go down and hear somebody harangue you? You're a doomsayer. Anyway, why would you do it? Don't blame it on them. You have to contribute, because unless you need something. Or you could say, why would somebody starve themselves so that they would look better? Why would somebody go and spend months and months or years and years, to build muscle so they can go out there on the beach and do like that? And the first day they get out and show off, a guy comes up and doesn't like their looks and shoots them. And you wasted all that effort. You've got to tell you that it's necessary. You have to do the sales pitch. Because there's one more way to look at it, is why would anybody deal with the secondary world in a serious manner if you didn't have to? And of course you don't have to. And then you say, but I do. And I say, well, why? If you had any possibility of being extraordinary. And you'd go, well. And let's again assume that you had just an expanded moment of lucidity. So that you didn't fall back and say, well, God said I had to. Let's assume that my mama said I had. No. Society think, why do you have to? Of course, the answer is always to an ordinary mind is, I don't the hell know. It's advertising. The less you need it, the more you must be told you do. But look, if you're somewhat out of the ordinary, as I suggest you look internally rather than look at Madison Avenue and blame them. And Kyrut said, a cow in the field is like a brain with 2 eyes, seeing a cow in the field. And Kyrut said, the male brings, this is no one of Kyrut's characters, or somebody, the advice doctor. And it says that the advice doctor got this letter. Dear doctor, is it my imagination or is most all entertainment still directed at man's older primary level of reality? This we've hit on several times, but I let Kyrut bring it back up because of what we've been talking about of late. Is every time we keep stressing, and most of the Kyruts that seem to be directed, and we've even been calling this a neural revolution. It's always been man attempting to push individual people here and there, get all involved, trying to push their own intellect somewhere beyond the horizon, beyond where it's necessary now, although in the past and currently people still think they have a soul and a spirit and all that. And it's this. And it's easy proof, as all of this is. All you got to do is stick the screwdriver up the nose and you can do away with a man's soul. You can turn the Pope into a non-religious person, just like that. You can take a person with artistic sensibilities, they call it the spirit of man. They can say, well, man has a mind, a soul, and a spirit. Man, they can say anything they want to. And all you got to do is put the screwdriver there and give it a tap, and you've got a very simple explanation to all of it. Whatever it was that they call man having, whatever other attribute he had besides the physical life, it be gone. It be yesterday's news, whatever it was called, it is au revoir, mother. All you got to do is hit this. So, all of this, all religions, all philosophies, but It's this aimed at. That is the itch that man feels. That is what keeps driving man, is to push this onward. This guy is asking, is it his imagination or is all entertainment, which you can look at the secondary world as being all entertainment, in a sense. It's all amusement. Is it still directed toward man's older primary level? All right, here's another great kind of explanation, in a sense, that Kyrut and I have been offering, that is contradictory. You see, Kyrut himself brought in one, if you're going to follow this right quick, that almost is pointing out the contradiction. Because if this is true, if man, that we now have easily 6,000 or 5,000 years of acceptable, by ordinary standards, recorded history, and if you took what Kyrut and I have been saying, that all of this drive, forget religions, forget mythology, that's just child's play, literature, all of it, is this growing, this wanting to grow. If that be so, is what this guy is asking, then why do we not have children, at least by now? Why do we not have children, instead of baseball cards, swapping philosopher cards? Forget Boog Powell. That's a shame. Do you realize most of us have forgotten Boog Powell? Forget Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. Me too. We should be trading cards with Nietzsche and Locke and Hume and even Girder. You see? If you think Kyrut is not magnanimous, so he let somebody write, assuming that he could have made this up. Somebody write and say, well, if that's true, why is our entertainment still directed at the primary? Think about it. Who are our heroes? Walk out on a college campus to the faculty. I don't mean the students, but assuming that they keep up with ordinary life. Scientists. If they sit around and talk, who are their heroes? Michael Jordan. There's nothing wrong with it. But you might think, well, wait a minute. These guys should be sitting around talking about philosophy. Or they should be sitting around, physicists talking about physics. And asking, where are the Max Plancks of the day? And somebody might say, I thought his name was Lumber. They'll be sitting around saying, you got any money on the NBA playoffs? So, there's a problem here, isn't there? That's what the guy's asking. Don't give up yet, though. That's not all of it. See, there's just a guy writing. And down here's something. My God, there's something else. Right, the guy, you remember, asked the doctor, is my imagination or is almost all amusement and entertainment still directed at man's older primary level of reality? 2 days later, the doctor considered sending back this reply, Dear sir, once safely on the merry-go-round, why do men want to go ride the roller coaster when they know it's going to make them scream and sweat? Well, all right. We've plowed through. I mean, there's no problem. But some of you should hear this. I'm not hesitating to do it. Put it another way. Here we go past any point of contradictions. Let's take Christianity. Well, and Judaism, but they all got their variations. The downfall of man. The Garden of Eden. There is where man, according to those stories, made the big mistake. That there is the sins for which we are still paying, right? I got news for you. There's another way. Is life just meant to be suffering? Do people remember how we offended the gods just so we can suffer? That's an easy way to put it and say, well, people like to feel bad. That's a hobby. But I got news for you. If you can hear contradictions within it, people enjoy remembering that. You don't hear it? People enjoy remembering the story of the downfall of man in the same way that atomic scientists think, Jesus, I'd give up all this if I had half the talent of a Michael Jordan. Well, I'm glad it's not my birthday and I expected any more than that. Although man is moving in a certain direction, I'm saying is neural, more and more. People, once they're securely on the merry-go-round, they're safe. Why would they get off? According to the doctor. and want to run off and ride the roller coaster when they know it's going to scare the hell out of them. Why do people that, well, here I am, I'm doing fairly well, I don't worry that much about life. And yet people love to dwell on, let's go past the downfall of man. Educated people nowadays, just sing around. House is almost paid off, the kids are through college, got a nice Mercedes. The guy comes on TV and says, do you realize the rate we're going, we will have destroyed this planet? 20 years from now, this could be a desert. This planet could look like Jupiter. And a guy sits there and go, that's true, that's true. Jesus Christ. You don't hear it? That's the same way of saying, hey, I'll swap you a Michael Jordan, for I feel pretty good. And Kairouch said, artists who curry the king's favor are like bombs that come with get well cards. Well, it's not exactly the same, but I even brought it myself that I was surprised once we started this that no one requested one from 3 or 4 nights ago. And I'm just going to guess that Kairouch sort of threw this in response to your lack of attentiveness. The one that pointed out that an artist, any artist who had an idol or a hero is like an apologetic bullet. Now, if you'll take artists past the point now of just painters and etc., how about someone truly attempting to think almost with no plagiaristic basis, an actual revolutionist thinker? If you got any concern, now the obvious one being Kairouch using the king, or the other one, the artist having an idol, a hero. You can obviously put out here. If you try to think fresh, let's start there right quick, and you think, well, that's not bad, but Jesus, what would my mother think if she heard me say that? Or what would my old friends think? What would the church think? If you do that, even if you were on the right track somewhere, even if you were a bullet fired, you're going to apologize. And you understand that as complex or as vague as it may have seemed, an apologetic bullet is a little less than, we'll assume, a fatal blow. In other words, yes, I'm going to think something new, and I almost got it, but I bet it's not as bad as I think. I bet if I spend a little more time, I can make this work in to Baptist theology. Assuming you're a Baptist. But this is not really anti-Buddhist, if you're a Buddhist, or this is not really against my nationalistic tendencies, assuming you had nationalistic tendencies. It's like trying to hurl a bomb like I'm going to do something new in my brain, but not enough to be offensive. So it's like, here it comes, but have a nice day. I think I can speak for Kairouch and say that he is insinuating that would be something this side, something a little less than an actual revolutionist. So whatever comes out of it is going to be a little less than any sort of actual new, fresh, artistic, original thinking. Well, some of you are comedians. That is, some of you will ask to have these repeated. I think you're trying to have a joke at Kairouch and my expense. Now I know you are. 3 in a row. Now, well, I'll reread this one. I don't think I'm going to say anything because it's exactly what we're talking about. But I know Kairouch spent a half a page doing it. As the bus whizzed by the playground, a clown face appeared from the front window of the bus, and it called out to the frolicking youngsters and oldsters. The voice said, the face said, a man with something to hide will hide it. And then just as the bus went by, at a rear window, another face came out and yelled, why have anything to hide? Addendum. An old man on the sliding board turned to a kid and said, wow, when I was a boy, they wouldn't even allow a vehicle like that within 10 miles of us. Could I suggest, all right, I said I wasn't going to say anything. Sue me again. Revolutionist thinking. Would they allow this sort of thing to run through your brain? And I don't mean just me. What if you get to where you do it to you? That's when you start wanting to do a get well card. Wait a minute, I got to hide this. That may be true, but wait a minute, I can't think that. That can't be right. And you don't know why. And the old man told the kid why. When I was a kid, they wouldn't even allow vehicles. They wouldn't even allow ideas. Buses. They wouldn't even allow buses like this within 10 miles of us. Well, the truth is, this sort of thinking, with no particular reason, I don't make you feel like a martyr. But you're not supposed to be within 10 miles of this kind of thinking. You could be within 10 generations or even 10 years, assuming the 10-year cutoff falls at least 9 years after you died or 1 year after you died. But you're not supposed to get any closer to that. But the best you're supposed to do is get up to your deathbed. I still don't know anything in literature that got close. They keep, doing these things, rosebud and it's all these enigmatic ideas. But the real deathbed scene to somebody who was getting somewhere in life, it was actually the bus was going somewhere, it should be right at the end. They should always say one thing, or at least thinking it. It's so close. They could have been within a second, but you're not ever supposed to be any closer than that. The old man in the story said 10 miles of us, but you're not supposed to be within a second. As long as you stay a second away from it, you're all right. And as long as you're doing ordinary thoughts, you can always stay a second away, because you'll always be dealing in polarized explanations, because you always say, well, wait a minute, let me think about that. And there was the second. You can die, so that you may not have to worry about it. I almost had it figured out, and I'll be damned if I didn't die. Well, maybe next time, And Kairouch said, to revolutionists thinking, the best thing about the past is that it's gone. A few people that might be watching this on TV, some of these I'm just so sure that the people's been hanging around here at the tapings. Some of these are just so obvious that I hate to bore you with. I don't mind repeating it, but I don't know what else to say. Sure I do. The past is important. The world as we know it, if the past were not important, if the past was not, in fact, still alive in the hearts, the souls, the spirit of right thinking, decent, humane, civilized people, the world would not be where we are today. P.S. Have you heard James Brown's new album? To revolutionists thinking, the best thing about the past is it's gone. Which is, this is not just fraught. This is not just filled with contradictions. This is like sprinkled. Because it can't be true. You can't say, well, the best thing from revolutionist thinking, or whatever you want to call it, X kind of thinking, futuristic thinking, fresh thinking. The best thing about the past from that view is it's gone. That can't be true. It can't be true. You can't mean that. Oh, all right. I mean, if you're going to keep... See, they said, you can't mean that, you can't mean that. That can't be true. So I give up. But I'll tell you this, you're not going to win the prize tonight. Could I have a verb? Well, I don't know, folks. I bet this was not going to get any better when I read it this time. But we were just talking about almost the same thing. And I swear to you, I'm not going to say a word, but I'll repeat it since somebody asked. And Kairouch suggested, Remove the apostrophe key from your typewriter and your thinking, and force the present to become neurally alive. Ankaru said, near the corner of a tree and some bad news, a young chap thought to himself, if thinking is a process, then revolutionist thinking is processing the process. If thinking is a process, and it is, thinking, well, anybody could say that, but it is a continual measurement, it is a continual assessment. But it is indeed a process. Ordinary humans want to make much more of it, as they're supposed to, than it is. The ordinary humans would give us very short shift shrift. If you tried to say, all right, it is a process, and it is not unlike the process of that other great, in fact the second most humongous organ, the liver, and its process of bile and other neat juices. That we can call that a process. Yes, we can. Well, the brain, the human mind, thinking, is not totally unlike that. And you cannot get any civilized, educated, sophisticated person to sit still for that. They're not supposed to. Because our minds have got to be much more than that, or we could not, for instance, be on the verge of destroying this planet. I mean, I'm talking for ordinary intelligence. If we said, wait a minute, if you're going to say that the brain is not much more than, it's a little larger, it doesn't even weigh anymore, it doesn't weigh as much, but it's a little larger than the liver and it's up higher. But if you're going to say that all we're doing is these, chemical reactions are nothing but a form of bile running through here, and that's all it is, how do you explain the fact that we're to the point that we're almost about to destroy a planet? You can't take people that's got nothing but livers for brains and say that they can do that. And of course, they got me. Or if they're religious, say, wait a minute. I mean, it's bad enough you're saying the brain is actually the soul and all that, but wait a minute. Then you're going to say that a man's soul is his liver, his kidneys, that the process of loving gods and goodness, wanting to be charitable, most of the time, some of the time. And you're going to equate it, with the operations of the kidneys. I said kidneys, didn't I? That's an old joke. And you're going to say that's all it is? And of course, you're just a sitting duck. I mean, there's no way to defend that. It's insane. Or at the very least, it's what? It's filled with contradiction. It's just, it can't be true. But this kid thought, if thinking is just a process, then what would revolutionist thinking be? I've just been calling it that, and then, you got to call it something. What would it be? And he does, if I may suggest to the young chap, it's a fair description. If you looked at thinking as just another process, then whatever this kind of stuff is processing the process. Or if you want to look at it another way, it's not all that strange. I certainly don't mean to infer that it's metaphysical, whatever the hell that means, or mystical, or strange. Well, it's strange, since nobody does it. But it would be, in a real sense, thinking about thinking. Of course, you told ordinary people, they think, so I do that all the time. That's like, for years and years, when it's still done, a kind of view of revolutionist thinking was known as know thyself, that old thing. And anybody that's educated, sophisticated, walking around in the civilized secondary world at all nowadays would say, well, I may not know myself completely, but insofar as that kind of challenge, that kind of directive that, that unexamined life is not worth living, as Earl Scribe said. Was it him or Descartes? Well, who was it painted my car? I can't remember. But if you tell somebody that, nowadays people will say, I agree. If you say the only thing worthwhile, or what revolutionist thinking is, in a sense, is to know thyself, and people say, well, I may not know myself completely. And of course, the Greek chorus comes up and says, well, who does? And they say, but I think about it. I am very moody. I am very reflective. I talk to myself. I'm a human. So if you tried to tell them that there's another way, that there's something beyond just ordinary thinking, it's think about thinking. People will say, well, I do. But what do they mean? It's on a polarized basis. It's on a judgmental basis. They say, well, I do. As a matter of fact, I'm in analysis. Because some of the things I think are very yucky. I just don't want to talk about it. Unless I can pay you $200, and I'll tell you. What I think about makes me feel badly. You mean bad or badly? Now, do you want a psychiatrist or a rhetoric teacher, an English teacher? In other words, you cannot get the ordinary mind. It's not people's fault. It's the way the mind is already. If you said, all right, there's thinking, but there's something beyond that. Think about thinking. And they go, well, Jesus, I do that already. What kind of secret's that? Do. The only way you can think about thinking, it could not be anecdotal. You could not be talking about what kind of guy you are. And in fact, if you could do it, you wouldn't comment on it. If you went to a lecture and they said, well, the whole secret is thinking is just an ordinary process, and what you should be doing is thinking about thinking. And if you could do it, you wouldn't say, hey, I want my money back. You might go up and try to take it back. Or you wouldn't holler, wait a minute, I'd do that. You follow? I'm not sure. I was answering for the kid's cousin. Well, here's one several people ask about. It's the last one. I told you I'd catch up. Kyrut left this. It's listed as a primary / revolutionary curio / improbability, which, to be a little more blunt, would be an impossibility, just taking ordinary, rational, using ordinary words. And it goes like this. There was this one wolf who was a hermit. I do recall it. More than several people ask about this one. If I keep doing these dramatics, see, we're almost out of tape and I can let it go. Think about it. A wolf, I'm going to specifically be as vague as possible. A wolf would be surely one of the more common examples that would spring to your mind, boing, if we talked about social animals. Even more so than man, probably, but that's not the point. But if there's anything sociable, if there's anything that is not a solo act, it would be a wolf. What would that have to do with revolutionist thinking? How could you be a hermit in your own hometown? I noticed no one asked about the one that said that there was one guy who lived down the street from himself. But anybody guess what that has anything to do with this one? Why would you bring it up? Killing time? Waiting for a bus? How could you be a hermit in your own hometown? It's easy, in a sense, to see that today being a hermit, at least in the midst of trying to do something different, trying to go on some kind of great journey, trying to figure out what a revolutionist way of thinking. In other words, to start out this kind of effort and to go become a hermit immediately, I'm assuming by now that all of you smell that that's probably not the best way. Which, of course, is why it's always been so popular again. That's why throughout the ages and even to today, if you're going to go off on some kind of great quest, whether it be known as religious or otherwise, what's one of the most common ways to do it? I mean, what's one of the first steps? Go to some kind of monastery. It may not be called that anymore, but it's to withdraw from life. Get to where you can reflect. Get away from all of this. As always, things that work in life, the reason they work is because they don't work. That's why they're popular in a real complex way. So, you could not be, in a sense, you should all realize, well, there'd be something wrong that if I was starting out all over, if I was right in the midst of starting this great journey, if I was just there in my 35th year and I turned around there in the dark woods and I thought, well, I'll be down, there's Dante. And you both thought, where will we go from here? And he thought, well, I'm going to hell. And you thought, well, I'll go to a monastery. You're both up to the same thing. I want to get away from this and find myself. Maybe I'll go to hell and, John Bunyan will be there, which is where that son of a gun belongs. But anyway. Or is it? Oh, how do they know that he wasn't actually Milton and Drag? At any rate, you should know to start out and to withdraw from life is not it. But there is, without any doubt, probably, and everybody that's ever been attracted to this for any considerable length of time, there is something that would strike one on the basis of being a hermit or more or less withdrawing from life, that eventually you think, well, that doesn't smell as bad as I used to think it does, or it doesn't smell as bad as you may think that I keep insisting it is. Now, that's after the fact. That's after the initial idea of becoming a hermit. There was this one wolf who was a hermit. And I ask you, what does that possibly have to do with revolutionist thinking? And I would be glad to answer it for you, but I'll be darned. We're out of time. So, until the next time, when we spin that big wheel of Kairoot, and you can all play at home, good night.